The idea of creating a so-called advance directive makes you squirm. You're not alone. This document gives your loved ones and your doctor critical information about your wishes in case you can't speak for yourself during a life-threatening medical emergency. You may not want to think about such things, but many people find that coming to terms with them brings a surprising sense of peace. Let's find out why. Where'd you get this?
Faced with ever more complex laws and issues regarding end-of-life medical care, many seniors have taken to preparing advance directives. An advance directive is a document that describes your wishes in case you're unable to communicate in a life-threatening medical emergency. Today, you can buy books that walk you through many of the key questions you need to consider. Dick and Martha Vayinger are working through a pamphlet called 5 Wishes with their daughter Amy to create an advance directive that suits their needs. It's not easy for them to raise end-of-life issues with her.
As we have thought about this, Dick and I would be healthcare agents for each other, and then you would be the one, if we are unable to make those decisions, you would be the one to do it.
But because Amy may have to make key decisions for her parents, this process is important. She needs them to clarify their wishes for her.
You can move me to another state in order to get the care I need. Would you mind if you were moved down to be near Bill because he wanted you to? I mean, what about that? Or do you want to always stay here to be near?
Publications such as 5 Wishes allow you to prepare an advance directive without the help of a lawyer, although you may still want to get professional legal advice on the subject. One of the most complicated issues, both legally and emotionally, is when you want medical care in a crisis and when you don't.
I would like to have pain medication that I would have under my control, because I don't really like to have a lot of heavy medication.
Well then, there's a couple of blanks that you need to fill in here about what life support means to you.
I wouldn't want any antibiotics, and I wouldn't want any tubes, and I don't think I would even want a ventilator. Mm-hmm. I just want the process to go in a natural way.
As the hospital people say, death with dignity, and tubes and extraordinary measures, I don't call dignified. So I agree with you 100%.
If you like, an advance directive can also serve as a way of communicating with your loved ones on an emotional level when you are incapacitated.
But I want to tell them that I really love them.
Well, that's another issue. That's another issue. On the other hand, I think it's better to tell them while we're alive.
In addition, you can use an advance directive to set out your wishes regarding a funeral and burial. Providing such information can comfort those you leave behind by giving them the opportunity to honor your final requests. It can be of surprising comfort to you as well.
It's really hard to think about, but it's so important to...
Yes, that's why it'll take a little time, I think, to sink in. Hey, I'm gradually becoming comfortable with these uncomfortable issues.
For the Vayingers, what began as an awkward exercise about difficult issues has ultimately brought them peace of mind.
I feel comfortable saying to people, my friends, even others who aren't my friends, that this is something that should be done.
I knew this would make me feel better, in that I would have happen what I really wanted. I haven't always been the greatest in defining what I want. But in this case, I thought, oh, I mean, this is an important thing to be dying, and I want it to be how I want it.
Here to discuss advance directives and the process of putting them together is Martha Knudsen, General Counsel for Upper Chesapeake Health, a community-based nonprofit health system located in Harford County, Maryland. Also with us is Fiona Sheridan, a clinical social work specialist with Washington Hospital Center in Washington, D.C. Thank you both for being here. There are so many different types of advance directives. You have your living will, you have your durable power of attorney, you have your do not resuscitate. Can you tell us the benefits and the differences, I guess, of each of those?
Well, there are a couple of different things you can do with an advance directive. One is to provide some instructions about specific things that you want or you don't want in the event that you're not able to give those instructions yourself. So the instructional advance directive is usually called a living will. Some people call them healthcare instructions. That's one type of thing that you can do. You can also combine that or do separately what's called a durable power of attorney, or some people call that an appointment of a healthcare agent. And that's what you're doing. You're appointing somebody to make decisions and to communicate with your healthcare providers when you are no longer able to make those decisions and communicate for yourself.
Ms. Sheridan, I know you actually help people to fill out these forms. Mm-hmm. What are some of the major obstacles that you see when a mature adult wants to go and fill out a form like this?
I think one of the main obstacles is the difficulty in discussing and facing death and dying issues. It's a very, very personal, very difficult topic for a lot of individuals. So that would be one obstacle that individuals do face.
Do you recommend that people read a little bit about it, or how do you get past that obstacle?
Absolutely. I think one of the best ways is to actually educate ourselves, to go out and seek that information, whether it be doing some internet searches or discussing with your physician, talking with your family, reading information. And there's plenty of wonderful educational materials out there that can help guide you through this process of making these very important decisions.
Ms. Knudsen, now I'm fairly young, I guess, as far as it goes, and have just done a will, but haven't really thought about advance directives. At what stage should you fill out this type of document, and should it be part of your will?
Well, I don't think it should be part of the will where you leave your property to whoever you want to leave it to. I think it should be a separate document. A lot of people do them at the same time, but you don't have to. And one of the important things that hopefully your viewers will take away is that whereas with a will you really do need legal advice to make sure that what you want to have happen happens, with an advance directive, it's something that you could sit down this evening with a pad of paper and start working on yourself. And you might come up with a very authentic and very useful document just all by yourself without any legal advice.
If I were to sit down, or one of our viewers were to sit down and fill it out themselves, what are some of the most important points or topics that they need to make sure to write down?
Well, the advance directives actually help guide you in many ways. So if you actually take a couple models with you, so it will give you options already to help guide you in your decision making. With the living will, it can break it down into life-sustaining treatments. What do you think about artificial nutrition and hydration and comfort care? And then with the power of attorney, I think one of the most important things about that is, who do you trust? Who is that person that is going to respect your wishes and your choices? It's not about what that person wants. It's about respecting what you want and making sure that your choices have been heard and communicated with your physicians.
I know that people make a lot of errors too, or they don't make sure that they update them regularly. I recently heard a story that someone who passed away had gotten a divorce and their ex-husband was actually in their advance directive. What are some other errors we need to make sure that we don't allow to happen like that?
Well, I think updating the information on a regular basis is the most important thing. People have enough trouble writing it down the first time, and I think they have even less inclination to want to take it out of the drawer that they put it in. Or my mother, she used to put hers in the fire-safe box, but the problem was none of us had a key to the fire-safe box. So we didn't.
That's not so helpful, is it?
I think just regular updating, taking a look at it and saying, is this what I still currently want? Is this the person I still want to make my decisions? Can go a long way.
You know, it's funny because the tone of our conversation is almost a little morbid or gloomy. Why do you think that that is what sort of surrounds even our conversation today, and it surrounds advance directives when you begin to talk about them?
Well, I think, anytime you're talking about one's death, that is just such a difficult conversation. And it's not one that I think in our society that we have openly and honestly at the dinner table. I think there's a lot of fear with death and dying and illness and hospitals and doctors. And so whenever you start talking about advance directives and, making these decisions, that's where I think you get some of that, the fear and the morbid,
the gloominess.
Yeah, the gloominess around it.
In our package, we talked about the program or the advance directive called 5 Wishes. And I think something like that, where it almost explains and it makes you more comfortable with your advance directive. It asks you things like, what kind of music do you want played at your funeral? I would think that would probably ease the situation a bit.
Well, I can give you my mother's personal experience. She did several of these before she found the 5 Wishes form, and that was her final and last advance directive, because it did make her feel so much more like she'd really expressed what she wanted to do. And believe me, she did that without ever talking to her lawyer daughter.
Well, that's fantastic information. I want to talk about some more resources that are out there and some ways to break down those barriers when we come back. It's time again for a short break. Don't go far. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion about Advance Directive with Martha Knudsen and Fiona Sheridan.
Do you know? How many Americans have a living will? A, 70%, B, 52%, or C, 40%? Do you know? How many Americans have a living will? Answer: just about 40%, but after the Terry Schiavo case of 2005, 70% of Americans said that they would think about getting one.
We're back to continue our conversation about Advance Directives with Martha Knudsen, General Counsel for Upper Chesapeake Health, and Fiona Sheridan, a clinical social work specialist with Washington Hospital Center in Washington, D.C. Ms. Sheridan, tell me, do you actually have to fill out a form to go into if you go into a hospital, or can you do it at home?
You can fill out an advance directive anywhere. You can do it in your own home at your dinner table, you can do it at work, you can do it in the hospital. It's wherever you want to complete it in the time that makes you comfortable.
So I hate to put the pressure on you because you are a lawyer, but do you need a lawyer for this?
Well, you don't need a lawyer. I guess the best thing I can say is you want a document at the end that makes sense to you. So if you are in a situation where you're being offered advice, fill this form out, and it doesn't make any sense to you, you can't read it and understand it, well, your family members probably aren't going to either. So some lawyers are better at writing in English than others. And so that's what you need to look for, and that's what you're trying to come out with at the end.
As opposed to legalese?
As opposed to legalese.
So you're a lawyer. What made you so passionate about getting into this?
Well, after I became a counsel for a hospital, I had a couple of different experiences, but one that just sticks with me over the years. And it was actually the family of someone about your age. And she was dying of a progressive disease. And I was sitting there in the room with them, and they kept saying to me over and over again, at least this is what she wanted. We know this is what she wanted. And they knew because she'd filled out a very detailed advance directive. And we were following it exactly the way she had laid it out. And the tears were coming down their face, but they said to me at least 5 or 6 times, at least this is what she really wanted. And it just lives with me over the years that that's what you can do for your family.
And yourself, frankly.
And for yourself, but as much as anything, it's the last best gift you can give your family. It's better than anything you're going to give them in your real will.
You brought up earlier the fact that your mom had picked her music. What are some of the other attributes to an advance directive? With the 5 wishes we talked about, how they ask sort of out-of-the-box questions. What are things that you do in your practice that's helpful in that way?
I think it's important to be able to take a look at a couple different advance directives and pick the one that's right for you, because it really is about your choice and your wishes and expressing that with your family and with your physicians. So it's taking a look at each aspect of the medical care and the decision maker, and maybe getting into the more personal about what kind of music do you want, or how would you want to be treated, what is comfort care for you.
Now, if you've already filled out an advance directive and you change your mind about something in it, whether it be your do not resuscitate or your living will, can you change an advance directive after the fact?
Absolutely. You can change it as many times as you want up until the time when you can't give any instructions. And in fact, you can even say to healthcare providers in the hospital, yeah, I know I filled that out, but I don't agree with it anymore. Don't pay any attention to that. And that's fine. That's a revocation.
You know, we've talked about the fact that death and dying is a very difficult issue for people. So I would assume that a lot of people, like your mom did, put it in a file cabinet or away, and they don't look at it again. Do you recommend that they look at it yearly or more often than not?
Well, I think as often as you can get yourself to look at it, and maybe make yourself an annual appointment like you do with your you know, the smoke detectors to put the batteries in on you know, the 4th of July or whatever you pick. That's one way to do it. I think another thing to remember is to give copies to people. Most hospitals are perfectly happy to have you drop off your advance directive ahead of time. First of all, because then they have, if you come in, but second of all, because you've done it ahead of time and you've had a chance to think about it. And what we find is about 1 in 10 people these days actually gives us an advance directive. That means that there are 9 cases where we sometimes have to kind of fly a little blind, and so do their families.
You work in a hospital, so I assume that you deal with so many people on an ongoing basis. Are there some unusual cases that you've had to deal with?
I think one of the most significant things that we see working in a hospital setting is the fact that individuals come in without the Advance Directive, and now it's too late because they're seriously ill, they're injured, and they no longer can speak for themselves and what they want. They can't tell the doctor what to do and what not to do. And so now the physician and their loved ones are in a position of having to guess at what that individual would have wanted.
Yeah, you bring that up. From a legal standpoint, if I tell my significant other or my relatives, this is what I want, does that pass or no?
Well, it depends on who you tell, because most states will have a list of people in a statute, someplace in a law, someplace that says this person, then go to this person, and if you can't find this person, go to this person. Well, if you tell somebody who's 3 steps down on the list and there's someone else above them, that's legally who the care providers have to go to ask, you know, the divorce is a good example that you used before. You've been divorced, maybe you never did an advance directive, but maybe you're in the middle of getting the divorce. It's very hot, it's very contentious, and now suddenly you get very sick. In most states, we would have to go to your spouse first, and that may be the last person that you would really want us to go to.
Right.
So as events in your life change, you need to kind of make sure the paperwork keeps up with those.
Are there any disadvantages to filling out an advance directive?
I honestly can't think of a single one. It gives you the perfect opportunity to tell your physician, your healthcare providers, and your family what you would want. It gives them the direction, and it takes a lot of the stress off of your loved ones, as opposed to making them responsible for making those difficult decisions in a time of true crisis, when all they really want to do is make you better.
In terms of the hospital setting, if there is a physician, are they under a certain obligation to ask if a senior has an advance directive?
Absolutely. There's been a federal law in place for, I think it's about 15 years now, that requires the hospital. So it sounds a little morbid sometimes when you come in for your, you know, your bunionectomy or something, and we say, do you have any emergency instructions in case you lose consciousness and we need to, you know, to do life-sustaining treatment? But the reason we're asking is because there's a federal law that requires us to ask every patient every time.
Really? For every kind of procedure?
Every patient, every time.
And that must be embedded in paperwork, I guess, right?
Yeah. We ask you over and over again. No matter, even if we asked you the last time you came, we're going to have to ask you again when you come this time.
We've talked about some resources that are out there. We talked about 5 Wishes. We talked about a few other resources. A lot of our viewers are not on the internet. And I'm thinking, I'm running home to fill out my advance directive because I'm sort of listening to what you're saying and concerned. Do public libraries have this information? What are some places that people can get it without having to go online?
I think going to your physician's office, obviously hospitals have them as well. A lot of the larger healthcare facilities actually have developed their own advance directives with information packets to go with it.
There are so many mature adults, there's so few geriatricians, and so many mature adults who are in need of several types of physicians. Is there a certain physician, is it your internist, your general practitioner, that you should tell about this, or should you tell every one of your physicians that you have an advance directive?
Well, I think telling and talking about it with your you know, whoever is really going to be kind of like the head of the team, which generally is going to be your internist, your geriatrician, for someone in that age category. That's probably the person that you want to talk to more than your eye surgeon or your ophthalmologist.
Fiona, tell me, what got you interested in it, especially working in the hospital and dealing with death and dying all day long?
Well, I think that's exactly one of the reasons I have been interested in advance directives. I find it quite challenging and oftentimes quite saddening to see somebody who has come in emergently to a hospital. They become suddenly ill and they no longer can express what their choices are. And then we're faced with having to make very difficult decisions for somebody not knowing what they want. So that's, I think, where some of that passion comes in, is, you know, really to look at the importance of expressing what you want and telling people and being open and having that communication.
I would think that writing it down also reinforces for you, it makes you more conscious, and it makes you really think about the decisions that you should, you know, make to make things a little bit easier for others. It's amazing to me the celebration we have around birth, but how scared we are of death and dying, and this information is really critical and really important. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.